So what I'd like to do is introduce to you the moderator for our panel session, and then Marissa is going to introduce the panel to you. So you met Marissa earlier during the women's song, the Warrior Song. Marissa currently works in client relations with Indigenous Community for Leadership and Development. And she works with First Nations to design and deliver personalized training that is developed with respect for the wisdom within each community. Previously, Marissa worked with the 4-host First Nations Secretariat during the Vancouver 2010 Olympic and Paralympic Winter Games on projects such as Indigenous Youth Gathering, in which 300 youth performed the Olympic opening ceremonies. Wow. She's been involved in TV appearances. Her appearances include Creative Native, My TV, Tribal Tracks, and First Talk, as well as 4 documentaries such as The Road Forward by Marie Clements and National Film Board of Canada. Please welcome back to the stage our moderator for our panel, Marissa Nahani.
Thank you very much. What an honor it is to be here for International Women's Day. Are you guys excited? Yes, let's give it a round of applause. I was told that I was going to be speaking to many inspiring women who make world changes, and I think this morning was very evident of that. Do we agree? Oh, yes. And I wanted to thank all of these global warriors. Just seeing the many different, if each and every single one of us put just a drop of water into this bucket of change, we'll start overwhelming with abundance. And in my short lifetime, I've been able to even see the changes. As an Indigenous woman, I was not encouraged to speak. The children are to be seen and not heard. But luckily, I had a very progressive father who encouraged me to public speak and to go out there, see the world, and interact with high esteemed women just like yourselves. We are the change that we want to see. I believe this. Each and every single one of the stories that I've heard so far is about all of us who want to see a better world, to have better equity, to see better, to also the amazing statistics that we've seen today on that when we give education to the mothers, how that actually affects everything on a global scale where we have longer women, our mothers living longer, we have children living longer, we have healthy communities. And so let's keep the momentum going. I see some of you with your cameras, and then I find that really exciting. And also I noticed on our lovely agendas that have been printed out for us, we have hashtags. So for those of you who are here, I highly encourage to take a lot of pictures, put it on social media, let the world know what we're doing. Let the world know that we have amazing women in justice, creating a better, healthier, safe environment for us. And I really want to commend our keynote speaker, Senator, on how culture is not stagnant. And this is so true in our culture and society today. As an Indigenous woman, we have stories of us surviving the ice ages, the Great Flood, and now we're in the concrete jungle. And each of those stages, we've had to adapt, we've had to learn, and we've had to succeed. And also the whole candy concept. That visualization makes very much sense. And one thing that I would love to see is how we can come together for those dreams that have been crushed. How can we work together to bring those dreams alive? Because every voice matters. And now I'd love to introduce our amazing panel that we have for you today. I'm so excited to share the stage with these women, and I'm excited to learn more about each and every single one of you. And we have about, I believe, just under 30 minutes total for this moderator. First, we have Karen Fry. She is a Chief and Director of Public Safety for the City of Nanaimo. And in her exciting 19 years in this career, she was able to take a chance, go to a career fair, and start as a dispatcher. Since then, she is now a captain who oversees the info matrix. I'm going to have to ask you what that means. And communications. The chief deputy, and also she was the deputy fire chief, administration and support services. Also, she was the fire chief of the city of Nanaimo, and she was elected in this role in 2017, and director of public safety. Let's give her a round of applause. We also have Nino Kung. Did I say that right? Okay. Director of Communications and Development at Mosaic. 25 years of program development, management, and leadership. And she was able to share all of these of anti-violence and anti-racism at international conferences. How lucky we are here to have you at this stage. She has been the president of the Board of Women's Research and also the president of Board of Battered Women Support Services, co-chair and Ending Relationship Abuse Society of BC, founding member of the South Asian Community Coalition Against Youth Violence. Wow, a true warrior. Awesome. Glad to have you here. Let's give her a round of applause. Also, we have Suzanne Muir. Inspector in Vancouver Police Department. She has been assigned Diversity and Indigenous Relations Section and in the Victim Service Unit in the Office of the Chief Constable. Sorry if I got that mixed up. And she's also a graduate in the Canadian Association of Chiefs Police Global Studies Programs, International Association of Chiefs of Police Association Women's Leadership Institute. Wow, I love how long all these titles are. And she's also in her leadership role in the police organization program, the New York Police Department. Wow, that's exciting. And she's also an instructor here at the Advanced Police Training, and she is the recipient of 2 Chief Constable Commendation and 3 Chief Constable Unit citations and 2 inspector commendations. Wow, that's so exciting. And also, last but not least, we have Stephanie McPherson, Provincial Director of Adult Custody Division, the BC Correction Branch. And with a very small operating budget of just $200 million, with 1,600 staffs and 10 different correctional centers, also at the Victoria Divisional Headquarters. That's very impressive. And her passions in human resources led to her management experience as a human resource advisor. And previous to provincial director in 2014, she was the deputy provincial director, assistant deputy warden of staffing at Vancouver Island Regional Corrections Center, and policy programs analyst. And with all of these experiences combined, her passion is supporting staff to be their absolute best. And that's very inspiring. Let's give her a round of applause too. So with our little bit of time limit, I would like to go one by one just to hear a little bit more of your stories. And then I may prompt and ask you for questions. And at the very end, we'll open up the floor to some questions. Does that sound good? Yes? We're all in agreement? Sounds good.
Thank you very much. So I think you all know a lot about me already from what you have in your agenda. And like probably most of you, I probably don't speak or talk too much about myself, right? We're women, and a lot of the time we stand out as being women in this industry or whatever the industry we are in, so we sometimes don't really try to make a big fuss about ourselves. I have 5 wonderful children, so amongst going to school and getting an education at almost 40 years old at Simon Fraser, I was also a single parent to 4 of them. They range in age from 9 to 29. Yeah, so having a career, I've worked in Surrey for 10 years, and one of 4%, I guess, you heard from the senator today, of women in the fire service. But I'm going to pass it along because we only have a little bit of time. But I'm very excited to be here and very proud of the organization and the fire service and where we're coming and where we're going. Oh, goodness. Press for progress for me. I think it's about continuing to move forward, working together, and being able to hear your voice. And that's really important because so many times as females, we let the men talk too much. Right? Or we're told our voice doesn't matter. And I think that's where we're changing, and that's what we're teaching our children. So it's about being role models and letting our voice be heard, because it's a different viewpoint and a different lens that we bring to all industries, and it's something that we need to keep doing and moving forward with.
Thank you. So I'm Ninu Kang, and I work for an organization called Mosaic, and I think many people in the room probably have had some connection with Mosaic. My role there is I'm the Director of Communications and Development, and I just celebrated 26 years last year, so it's very exciting. I've had the opportunity at the organization of playing various roles, right from frontline client services to management and more recently in a leadership role. But just to give a bit of context, I'm originally from India. I was 10 years old when I came to Canada. The story my father always liked to say was that he moved to Canada because of his 2 daughters. He was fighting for women's rights in India, and he realized that that's not where he wanted to raise his daughters. He didn't think that they had the opportunities that they would have in countries other than India, and he chose Canada, and lucky for us, Canada welcomed us. But coming here, growing up in Victoria as a young woman, there weren't a lot of other brown children in schools in those days. And of course, I'm dating myself, but I'm talking about mid-70s and 80s. There was definitely overt racism, but I have to say that I was so grateful to be in Canada that, you know, it was like the spinach you had to eat or the broccoli you had to eat. It wasn't a big deal. You had food, right? And it wasn't until later in my professional career and through my academics that I started to put the name definition to racism and then gender equality. Again, the gender inequity and racial inequity growing up as a young woman. I think someone here said if you don't see it, what was the... If you can't see it, you can't be it. So, you know, it was invisible to me. So my own life and my growth has been really kind of an evolution. As I've learned more, I've been in a privileged place to be able to step into progress. And I think that if you ask me, and hopefully I'll have a chance to share a bit more, so I don't want to hog the mic, but I think for me, progress, press for progress means 4 things. One is that not all women, not all of us start the race at the same place. Not all of us have the fancy shoes that let us run fast. Some of us start the race without shoes. And sometimes we're all kind of running only to fall into a hole because young girls are sexually abused as children. And as adults, only to be thrown back 10 to 12, 15 years into trauma and recovery. So we don't all start, and it's based on the color of our skin, it's based on our class, it's based on our ability to speak the language without an accent and all those things. So one is that not all women are the same, and we are not a homogeneous group, and we need to pay attention to all women, and I think that really came across today. Number 2, we need to acknowledge that Indigenous women are far behind starting the race than us, so we all have to ask ourselves, if we're not Indigenous, what's our responsibility to create a narrative that is going to create progress for Indigenous women, because we will not have progress as women if we don't stand and be allies to our Indigenous sisters and their communities. Number 3, we need to engage men. I think men have, many good men, hashtag good men, are standing next to us. They're saying, we want to know your struggle. We don't have to understand it, but we're with you. We need to bring those men along, so there's not just, this many of us fighting, but hold my mic, that there's this many of us. We still probably have two out of my fingers of men who may not join us, and that's okay. We need to bring more along. And number 3, we need to create space for young people. It's not only about mentoring, it's also about learning what do they know about the world they live in today, and how can we create a space for them to create the world they want to live in. So maybe I've said everything already, and I'm going to go and leave the stage, but sorry, I went a bit longer.
Well done. Hi, I'm Suzanne Muir. Vancouver Police Department is introduced. It's a real privilege to be here. I see so many of my colleagues from other police agencies, and in fact, many women who I attended the academy with here today. So really interesting to see. And I say this career really truly has been a privilege. I've been very fortunate and had many opportunities. I'm so inspired by the stories that have been shared here today. People sharing their own struggles as they've worked through their careers, and I've been no different. And I think it takes a lot of courage to bring that forward, so I thank those who have done that. In terms of my career, how it's unfolded, I've moved throughout various areas, operations, into investigation divisions, and now where I find myself in the diversity unit. And what I've really found and recognized as I've moved through is the importance of the people who work alongside you and the strengths that every individual brings. And I look at kind of the press for progress and what that means, and it's really caused me to think and ponder about what is so important. And when we talk about law enforcement, when we began, and I began in the police department, women only made up 7% of our organization at the Vancouver Police Department. We're well over 25% of the way now, which is really encouraging to see that progress. But I also see in the way and the press for progress, when you look at representation by population, you look at diversity. Inclusion, having different ethnic groups, everyone bringing different strengths to the table. And I guess my real hope is that that progress continues and we continue to recognize the unique strengths that every individual brings to an organization and to society.
Hi, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here today. And if you go back to my career with the BC Public Service, what now is about 30 years ago, I would never thought I would be in the position that I am in today. And, I started off, I was telling my colleague, when I was growing up, it was my 2 brothers that were encouraged to go to post-secondary school. And so they did, and I didn't. And, but I had a different path, but I wouldn't be here today unless I took that path. And what I have to say is that, I started off as the person doing the typing and answering the phone, but then I followed my passion, and that was for working with people, and I just always let that be my guide, and it wasn't a position I was trying to achieve. It was, how can I make a difference? And I feel so passionate about the work that we do in BC Corrections and adult custody specifically, and I feel that I am in a position where I can make influence. I can actually change people's lives, and that is such a gift, and particularly for women, because the women that we see coming in, my colleague Eleanor Arand was talking, the women that come into custody have had such traumatic lives, and one thing that I'm really proud of, where I was making a difference, was we had advocacy groups saying that we were keeping women away from their babies, we were taking their babies away. And what people didn't know was that we were actually preventing women from coming into custody. We were preventing women from getting sentences in custody because we were working with the Crown and the defense to try and find an alternative to custody so that women could be in the community with their child, with their children, and supporting their families. And that's the type of work I do, and that's why I love what I do. So, Press for Progress, this. So you have to use the microphone. The microphone gives you your voice, and public speaking is not my comfort level, but I'm getting better at it as I practice. But I really encourage you to don't be afraid. Take that first step, and you'll realize it's not as difficult as you think, that people are interested in what you have to say, and it's important. So make sure you use that microphone whenever you get the opportunity. And be a voice for those that don't have a voice or that don't feel that they can have a voice, because you will make a difference in their lives. And for my staff, I look for opportunities to make them shine, and to make them feel more confident, to push them outside their comfort zone. They might not like me in the beginning, but after they take that first step, they always are thankful. And I always am thankful for the people that supported me in my career. I'm the first provincial director of adult custody. My predecessors were all male, and I guess maybe it's your attitude that gets you where you want to go. And if you aren't concerned about being in a room full of men and speaking your voice, then you will be heard, because you'll show that you have courage and you do have something valuable to say. So thank you.
Thank you. Whoa, that's a little loud. One of the common themes that we've been hearing is, be yourself. Be true to who you are. If there has been some things in the past that have kept you quiet or in the shadows or away from telling your story, or maybe we think maybe nobody wants to hear your story, but it's very evident that each one of these amazing women come from very diverse backgrounds and have very different experiences, but they are interesting, and you are interesting, and at the end of the day, we all want to see real people with real experiences, and how did they pursue in these areas? And my first question for Karen is, you talked about, hearing your voice matters, and different perspectives. How did you gain the courage in your field to really allow your voice to be heard in different situations where maybe you weren't as supported? And where did you find that support?
There I go. Wow, good question. I think one of the interesting things in the fire service, like we heard Jen talk earlier, it's based on seniority. And so really the people at the top of the chain, the fire chiefs, the captains, have been there for 20, 25, 30 years. And they're all in their mid-50s when you're coming up and you're trying to hear your voice. So for me, going up into a higher rank as an officer position in my late 30s was difficult. And, let's face it, a lot of the men are traditional, especially in our industry. So it was about gaining that confidence to know that I actually knew something. And whether my bosses or colleagues knew that I knew it or having that ability, for me it was about building relationships and trust amongst my peers and amongst my colleagues in the fire service. And they're all around. And sometimes you might feel like in your own role and in your own department, you're not really supported. But guess what? There's hundreds and thousands of people. And not only are they in the fire service, they might be in police service, paramedics, corrections, finance. there's women leaders out there everywhere, and having that support and somebody else you can have colleagues and building relationships. So for me, that was probably the biggest ability, is that when people say, no, you got this, right? You know, or they're actually asking you questions instead of pushing you down. And it's about getting that confidence to hear your voice.
Yeah, it's amazing. Gain trust to gain confidence in your peers. I love that. And Ninu, so I like hearing your story about how you had a very progressive dad. I had a progressive dad too. You know, he always, I don't know, pushed or gently shoved me onto stage. But that's where it made a real big difference in my life. And I like hearing about your 4 steps on how we're not all in the same, we don't start the race at the same start. And acknowledging Indigenous women, that's very progressive too. I like seeing how all of us can work together. And I would like to hear more about your 4 steps that you have. Or if that's where you would like to go with your...
Well, I think, let me share something else that is part of my life that I think is relevant here and maybe hasn't come out. And that is for, in my job, for about 20 years, I've been running a treatment program for men who use violence. So many of my probation brothers and sisters who are here in the room or who I've worked with. So I ran a treatment program that was specifically for South Asian men. So it was me and a male facilitator speaking Punjabi or Hindi with a group of about 12 to 16 men. And it's a 16-week program that we ran once a week in an evening. I think many of you are familiar with the model. And I remember whenever I would go and do that presentation, people would ask me out of the audience, what's it like to be the only woman in the room with offenders? And so there was already some, for me, always a problem, or abusers, actually, they used to say. There was always sort of a unsettling question that I had about that question, which was that men were labeled as abusers. And when I worked with them in the room, and men would cry and they would share their experiences, and they wanted a better life and they wanted to make changes, I always got this privilege to see the men from a different light than when they're in the system and we label them. And one time, and so I wanted to just bring that up, and I know when I was asked to do this presentation, one of the things I said is that we need to hold men accountable to the violent behavior while we treat them with dignity and treat them like humans. And I think in all our work, no matter where we are, when we're dealing with the perpetrator or someone who's entered into the system, how do we do our work by making sure that we see everyone as humans? And I wanted to just say about my father. My father passed away 7 years ago, and he always puts a smile on my face whenever I say my father, because my mother's amazing too, by the way. A researcher came about our program that I was running and asked me this question, Ninu, how do you do this work, being the only woman in the room with these men? And anyway, many, many questions as researchers ask, but one of my answers, which really surprised me, and the question was, what is the one factor in your life that led you to this career, led you to this job? And it was my father, and he said, well, what's the one incident that that you remember? And I was 7 years old in India, in our village, and so I'm trying to give you a visual, but in our village, the men would sort of come and be with my father, and he was politically active, so they would all sit in this one space, and the women were in a separate space. So my father, I had learned a song and a dance in my school. So he would put up a stage about this high, and the men would sit there, and he would tell me to come up on the stage and sing the song. And when you're 7 years old and your dad's there, you're like on top of the world, right? Because your dad's cool, and so you think everybody wants to hear you. And I think that's where I got my voice.
Thank you. I always encourage, as powerful women out there, we've always had strong dads. So, for the men allies out there, you guys matter as well because you help encourage us to stand up on our 2 feet too. And definitely moms are there too. And so Suzanne, hearing about the how we went from 14% to 25%, and in the police stations, and how diversity is progress. And what do you see the best part about having the diversity and the change and having women making changes within the police department? Have you seen, in your experience, what types of changes have you seen? More of a humanizing, I don't know if that works, yeah.
Very good question. I think with the change, what you've seen, and it's been brought up by one of my other panel members, I think it's a different conversation and it's a different dialogue at the table, because really women and men and individuals, everyone comes and brings their sort of unique lens and ideas. And I'm always careful because I don't like to sort of gender profile. I think, women, it is International Women's Day, we're talking about women. We bring a lot of strengths that other individuals bring as well, but that ability to really connect people, I think build partnerships both within our own organization and outside as well, has been really important, and something that I've really seen has kind of changed in that conversation. But I've also seen a huge change in terms of the acceptance of women, and I think that it goes back to that sort of press for progress idea, and that it's a more inclusive, welcoming space for more. And again, we have more work to do, but those are some of the things that I'm seeing.
And how have those changes affected you in your job?
I think it's given me a voice, or more of a voice. It's creating an environment that's inclusive, where, and again, back to the panel, where you feel there is a place for your voice at the table, for your ideas. And not only is it encouraged, it's solicited. And that's the real change I've seen. Thank you.
I like the acceptance of just being who you are, and also an amazing part about being in a society where we don't need to focus on the gender. There's male, female, transgender, and it's a beautiful thing to witness how lucky we are to be in this time, the small time part of in the history of the world. And So our next question is, I'm always inspired by how you are influencing positive change and to be your best self. And it's also very encouraging to bring kids back into the community. The wonderful thing about children and also people who are still holding on to that childhood, maybe past traumas, is to let people be more free to be who they are, to embrace that child, and to be a part of society in those areas, and also using the mic. I think that's very, very powerful thing to use. What kind of strategies do you use to encourage people to bring out their best selves?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, obviously it depends on the person that you're working with, but it just in talking to them about their knowledge, their passion, that they have a unique perspective that's very valuable in terms of problem solving or effective decision making. We need people to contribute. So if you're called to a meeting to discuss an issue, it's important that you speak, and I think your voice is really important to be heard. in your perspective. And with my staff, I always make sure that I have a conversation with them in advance and make sure that I acknowledge their maybe their lack of confidence or their uncertainty, and do some practice runs with them and make sure that they are comfortable with being in that meeting or in that forum where they're going to be asked to contribute. Always identifying an area that they can contribute, where they can contribute, where their knowledge base is really strong, so that they'll be comfortable, and just being there for them, checking in. Just acknowledging where they're at, and acknowledging that speaking up can be anxious, that you're never certain how you're going to be interpreted or whether your comments are going to be seen as being valued, but they absolutely are. And I often think back in school where you don't put your hand up because you're afraid of asking the question, but somebody else asked that same question. They were brave enough to put their hand up. So just encourage people to take that first step, not worry about what other people think, because by asking a question or contributing an opinion, you are speaking up for others and giving them a voice in that respect.
Nice, thank you. Oh, okay. We are getting to the end, so thank you very much. Just a few takeaways that I got from is to unleash someone with their inner abilities is to have someone that will listen to your stories and say, yes, I acknowledge that you have this, or there's something inspirational in something that you have, and to say, here's a special gift that you can contribute. I know when someone says, when they listen to me, it's like, I don't know, is that kind of crazy? What do you think of that? It's like, do you agree? But just to have someone to say, yes, your voice matters, and I like what you said, and I encourage you to keep on doing that. So thank you, panelists.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all that you've brought. It has been amazing from our perspective. And something like this doesn't happen, doesn't get put together. When I said that the agenda was packed, now you know. All the people who came and contributed, that didn't happen easily. And it was only because of an incredibly fierce, passionate woman. And she's just going, don't you dare do this, but I am going to do it. And Jennifer's going to come up and share thanks to the team that was behind her. But I need to tell you a little bit about this woman. She got an idea and came and told me about 3 weeks after things were already rolling, oh, I'm going to do this, is that okay? And I said, okay. Be fierce. If you're going to do it, just go for it. And she did. And she phones up Senator Jaffrey. Like, she's fearless. Who does those things? And we're so thrilled she did, and so thrilled you're here. And I know that many of you that were up here on the stage, she did that to you too. And thank you for taking her call. Don't put her on, don't screen her from now forward, because we need you, because we need all of you. But Jennifer, you've done an amazing job. You've assembled an amazing team. And please, a big round of applause for Jennifer Jasper.
Yeah, you did it. So Barb asked me if I could take the last piece, which was wise words. I don't have any. You've all said more than I could possibly think of, so I'll let those words set. But what I do have is gratitude for all of our amazing presenters that came up on stage and did take my call and answered my emails. You're inspiring, you're amazing. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your stories. Also, funny story. So as I was playing with your pictures, you would often wind up as my desktop. So I had Suzanne Muir, you were my desktop for a while, and Mobina Jaffer. And people would come in and see who was on my screen that day. And I took you off because it seemed a little bit creepy. But I'm going to put you back on. because it really, all the stories and everything that you shared today, it's just inspiring. And if I ever grow up, I hope I can be just like you. And I need to thank the teenagers that got up early today, put on purple shirts and ran around. You're awesome, and in a way, this day is for you, so I'm glad that you could be here. I also need to thank everybody at the JI, and I actually mean everybody. From the President's office, Michelle, for jumping in and taking on whatever was asked, to all the different divisions that really reached out to their communities and their people. It couldn't have happened without you. And then my own lovely community and social justice team that I've heard so many times, what do you need? And when I said I don't know, which was most of the time, they jumped in. And Christina, you're not bossy, you're helpful. And here's just their names. I won't read them all. A special thank you to Jody, who really stepped up and made all of this come together. That was awesome, thank you. And to Deanna as well, who wasn't part of the committee but kept getting roped into everything. And my co-chair, Sandeep Gill, who was in it day in, night, weekends. She was texting me with ideas and thoughts and making things happen. And if she guilted you into being here, I'm really glad she did. So, a couple last pieces. We don't want this to be something that just you sit, you listen, you get inspired, and you leave and go back to your regular life. We're asking you to make a commitment to press for progress, and that's the last live poll. So take that out, take a look at the action statements, and make a commitment for what you're going to do for the next year to continue the fantastic work that you're already doing and continue to press for progress. We're going to get all of that information and we'll share it out, what we're doing as a group to continue this movement. You can also go to the International Women's Day site and they have the commitments there as well, so you can make like a really, really public commitment. We also have our silent auction. I'm not sure if you got a chance to take a look at that. That will close at 1, which is in about half an hour. How did we end on time? That is a miracle. So it'll close at 1, and those funds will go to a new JIBC award that we're creating for a student here that is pressing for progress within their own community. If you want more information on that award, I can pass it on to you, but it's going to be able to keep this event and mark this event, keep it going. And door prizes. So we were going to put stuff under the seats, but we decided that was a little bit too dangerous. So on the backs of your name tags, some of you have stickers. If you do have a sticker, well, jump up and yay! God, I hope those were probably the people that left. So we have door prizes at the reg desk, so head out there and collect your prize. Other than that, happy International Women's Day. Thanks for being here.